Hello, this is Context Special Live on Air. I'm Orkhan Amashov here, habitually, incorrigibly, and unrepentantly in the business of asking the most central, the most exacting, and at times, the most unrelenting of questions, all in pursuit of answers that illuminate rather than obscure. We're live on air as a very significant moment unfolds in Washington. The third encounter this year between US President Donald Trump and his Ukrainian counterpart, Volodymyr Zelenskyy, is about to begin. In a moment or so, we shall be joining the live feed from the White House, bearing witness to the public portion of that very meeting. But before we do so, and time permitting, we shall be exploring some of the key underpinnings and deeper forces related to the present reality. This meeting follows two rather different encounters earlier this year. The first one in late February, which went terribly bad wrong for President Zelenskyy, and an experience widely described and acknowledged by many as an utter humiliation. And the second one in June, which marked, in view of many, a notable improvement with a more constructive atmosphere, and Trump even offering praise for certain Ukrainian reforms. However, ambiguity remained and still remains in many ways, particularly over concrete US security commitments. And of course, there is a broader tapestry at play. President Donald Trump is effectively speaking to both Russia and Ukraine in an effort to bring the two sides together, if possible. Just yesterday, President Trump held a 2-hour telephone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That very conversation has given rise to a fresh possibility that the two leaders may soon meet face-to-face, perhaps within 2 weeks, with Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban already confirming that preparations are well underway. And the location, of course, matters a great deal, matters indeed a great deal. Such a meeting cannot happen in Washington or in London and Paris, certainly not in Moscow. And it is not incidental that Budapest is now primed to be a venue for this very meeting. A NATO capital with a distinct voice on affairs or related to Russia and Ukraine, and a leader, Viktor Orban, who is appreciated by both Trump and Putin for reasons that may be different, or perhaps not so different after all. Well, enough of digressions. I would like to return to the subject matter defining today's agenda, Trump-Zelenskyy meeting. There are some central questions, of course. What can we expect? What is the key deliverable? And can the momentum induced by the recent Gaza peace conference be maintained? And can Trump now turn his attention to Ukraine as a Gaza situation appears to be somewhat stabilizing? On a more practical footing, what role, if any, do those now fabled Tomahawk missiles play in the great game unfolding before our eyes? Are they a bluff or lever of pressure? Or are they truly actually intended to alter, quite literally, the landscape of the war or circumstance on the ground? The Kremlin has already called their potential deployment a matter of grave concern. As Washington holds its breath with all eyes fixed upon that peculiarly shaped cockpit of American power, the Oval Office, I'm now joined by two guests, John Kavalik, senior editor at Issue Insight, and Ubey Shahpanda, NU's Washington correspondent, who joins us from Istanbul, Turkey, a country that is quite often described by many as a potential future mediator between Ukraine and Russia. Welcome to both of you, John and Ubey. Thank you very much indeed for joining. Well, thank you very much indeed. My first question is going to be addressed to John. John, the meeting is about to begin. This is the third meeting this year. What is your major expectation from this very meeting?
Likely, we're not going to see a repeat of meeting one. We're likely going to see more of a similarity to meeting number two, and then also the meeting that took place in the Vatican. But I think that everyone should be very cautious in terms of expectations. Anything other than the meeting will take place. We now have a dynamic of Trump-Putin summit number 2. We have it in Hungary. So there are a lot of indigestibles for President Zelenskyy, and it's going to be another struggle for him to manage not necessarily his dialogue with President Trump, but in terms of the Oval Office pool spray, to manage the dynamic of the questions, because the questions are going to be, how does he feel about another meeting between Trump and Putin, given the fact that The one in Alaska did not seem to produce anything beneficial. How is he dealing with President Trump's decision to have it in Hungary, where Prime Minister Orban is not a big fan? And then number three, with respect to the tomahawks, how is he going to thread that? Because President Trump has been migrating toward an answer's no. And so basically get through the pool spray so they can get as quickly as possible to the meeting off camera and to the lunch.
Thank you, John. Ube, the meeting is about to begin. The public portion of the meeting is yet to begin. Earlier we talked about, with you before the program, about the meeting in August, Anchorage meeting. Connecting that meeting with the one which is going to take place later, do you think the previous one was a complete failure? Or perhaps it laid the foundations for further interaction between the two countries, and that was agreed back then is going to be pursued later? What is your feeling about what happened in August, and how do you think that will bear upon what is going to take place in 2 weeks in Hungary?
Intent here by the Trump administration is really send a signal to Moscow and to the fact that President Vladimir Zelenskyy is back in the White House with President Trump so soon after the last meeting is very significant, and that volumes in terms of messaging from President Trump, who has been public stating on how he has been disappointed with President Vladimir Putin. On Truth Social, on a number of occasions, President Trump had posted that he had once believed that his relationship with President Putin that was cordial would pave the way for a peace deal to end the largest and deadliest war on the European continent since the Second World War. But President Trump has lamented that relationship has not really anything or led to anything constructive. So we have seen a notable shift in President Trump's and his attitude towards the two world leaders. We did see a leaked reports of some of the inside details on how that meeting in Anchorage, Alaska, between President Trump and Vladimir Putin went. In short, did not go well behind closed doors. President, according to these two media, just rambled on about 17th century Cossacks that he believed gave Russia territorial claims over should have belonged to Russia. And as he droned on, according to these leaked reports, President Trump at some point got frustrated. He reportedly raised his voice and threatened to storm out. And of course, as we remember, there were supposed to be a dinner and a number of follow-on meetings by the technical teams on the Russian side after that leadership meeting took place. That did not happen. Those were killed, and President Putin promptly following his with President Trump. So that additional granular insight on how that meeting in Alaska went, given that it did not really lead anywhere, that President Putin had reportedly outright rejected President Trump's ceasefire and peace plan, more seriously irked President Trump. President Trump does not be pushed around by any world leader. And so we have that a shift in Washington. We reports that the U.S. military and intelligence is increasingly covertly coordinating and providing targeting data to the military in their long-range strikes deep into Russian territory, targeting those Russian refineries and crude oil storage facilities that have hurt Russia's petroleum refining capability. So the big question now is, what will Trump tell Vladimir Zelenskyy? Vladimir Zelenskyy wants those long-range missiles, those Tomahawk missiles, yet another American weapon system in the Ukrainian arsenal. But certainly here, the elephant in the room in the meeting in the White House is the Kremlin.
Thank you, Ube. Before the meeting begins, the public portion of that meeting begins, I just would like to put this question to you, John. It has been said by many people that Ukraine's cause often has been overshadowed during the height of the Gaza crisis. And now that we have certain degree of tentative stability related to Gaza, with the first phase of that Gaza peace plan being implemented, Ukraine is now poised to reassert itself as a subject on the global agenda, and the momentum generated at the recent Middle East Peace Summit in Sharm el-Sheikh in Egypt could somewhat spill over into the Ukrainian theatre. What do you make of this? I mean, do you agree with this fundamental argument that when all eyes are fixed on Gaza, Ukraine becomes somewhat declined as a central subject, somewhat neglected? Does it have any consequential bearing on the fate of Ukraine when actually people don't talk about it?
It does. If I may digress one moment, that is one other moment to be watching for if it happens in the pool spray, and that is President Trump has already teed up that there's a potential of President Zelenskyy participating at the summit in Budapest. Now, the fact that Ukrainian Railways has an established route from Kiev to Budapest, but President Zelenskyy could easily travel from Ukraine to Hungary because it's a border country. And that's going to be uncomfortable for President Zelenskyy to answer, whether the question comes from President Trump or it comes from a member of the media. But that's out there. And of course, that is the goal of President Trump, to get the three of them, three of them together and get the two of them together. In terms of your question, absolutely, President Zelenskyy and the government of Ukraine has been incredibly frustrated during the last 2 years because Gaza, Israel has overwhelmed anytime there's a disturbance, and the media focuses all upon it, which clearly, we can't really balance two big issues at the same time. And so President Zelenskyy and his team are very aware that even though there is a pause in what is happening in Gaza, the story of Gaza, the story of Israel, has not ended and won't end for quite a while. And every time there are either some more killings by the Israeli Defense Forces of Gazans, or Hamas does something, or anything happens, that he knows the media attention is going to switch, because for President Trump, he doesn't want anyone to be talking about, quote, unfinished business. Yep. And as we've seen with the 8, 9, however he calculates the peace that he's created, many of these aren't peace. They're either ceasefires, temporary stoppages, but official peace treaties, official end to the conflicts have been illusory. And so President Trump knows, and President Zelenskyy knows, anything that drifts back to Gaza or Israel means less attention for Ukraine.
Thank you, John. As we see from the live feed we get from the White House, preparations are underway, and probably President Zelenskyy will be there in a minute or so. In the meantime, Ube, what do you make of this argument that President Donald Trump, who is a very kind of a rational actor, he wants to achieve something, he wants credit for that, definitely. Now that there is some degree of momentum attained regarding Gaza, as John said, far away from being sorted out properly, of course, but there is some momentum that could actually be transmitted into the Ukrainian theatre, and President Trump will be able to focus more on Ukraine. What do you make of that?
Well, the fact that war in Gaza has essentially come to an end, that the killing has stopped, that the hostages are back, that the deceased hostages are in the process of being returned to their family members, that there are no more bombs and shooting in Gaza, is also impacting the negotiations, at least the discussions around trying to bring an end to the Russian war. In fact, we've seen President Zelenskyy publicly state that President Trump's role and the pressure that President Trump put on Hamas, including the public statement saying that that it should just be allowed to do whatever it wanted, merely if Hamas does not agree to the that Zelenskyy has referenced that publicly, saying that pressure that President Trump brought forth was critical to ending the war. And Zelenskyy wants that same type of pressure by the American press on Vladimir Putin as leverage and to force Putin to the negotiating table. So far, Vladimir Putin has not any signals that he's ready to accept Trump's peace plan, which, according to reports, Putin rejected from the get-go during their meeting in Alaska.
It's a very, very interesting moment. You said about Vladimir Zelenskyy wanting President Trump to exert similar pressure on Russia in order to make sure that something could be attained. John, allow me to put to you this question, and it's going to be very blunt. There are those who say that for Donald Trump, it's all about appearances, about projecting impression of having achieved something. So when it comes to Ukraine, what are those things do you think Trump needs to do now in order to put pressure on Russia, in order to extract those confessions? Because there's a school of thought about Trump that he does not, he cares about his legacy, he wants credit, but also it's the very same people who argue in that fashion, however paradoxical it may sound, also confess and they say that Trump is the only person who can actually change the destiny of Ukraine. What are those actions that Trump needs to undertake in order to push Russia, Vladimir Putin, into those painful concessions?
The primary change that President Trump would have to do is shift back from his current position, which is the Russia-Ukraine war is more for Europe and the rest of the world to define the potential outcomes than it is for the United States. But you're absolutely right. He has, in 9 months, used what is called the bully pulpit, but he's used the bully part of it to get people to do what he wants, either temporarily or permanently. And so if he were to choose so, he could use his tariff authorization on China, on India, unilaterally. But what he has said is, no, I want the European Union to sign off on that as well. So he's always looking for there to be collective responsibility so that if something goes wrong, he can project the blame. But even if something goes right, whether it's unilateral, bilateral, multilateral, he'll still take credit for it. So for President Trump, he could do things. He could take steps that materially would impose costs upon the Russian Federation pretty immediately, but more so using China and India in terms of their energy purchases, including China in terms of its product exports. He could ratchet, but the costs would be to United States taxpayers, United States consumers,
Sure.
to his base within the U.S., and that's where it gets dicey for him. So I don't think that we're going to see him be as robust and threatening to President Putin, because he's also looking past Ukraine-Russia war to the rest of the relationship, whether it's nuclear arms talks, whether it's trade, or et cetera.
Very complex picture, John. We're still waiting for President Zelenskyy to arrive at the White House, and there's been some delay, which is, I suppose, is only too natural. In the meantime, let's continue our conversation in terms of expectations. I imagine, Ubi, but this sort of meetings and post-meeting statements, on the basis of what we hear, it's very difficult to discern what has happened in reality. I remember I was covering, together with you, of course, the meeting in the Anchorage, and initial impression was that they achieved something, really, because Putin was very positive and Trump was very positive as well. But what we noticed back then, that there was supposed to be a proper press conference with questions put by journalists, but that did not happen. And also everything looked like very brief and substance-free. And now, in retrospect, we understand that probably that was a big failure. In the meantime, Ube, I want to specifically ask about Tomahawks. Their possible deployment has been discussed over the past few days. This discussion in itself has provoked strong reaction in Moscow, with Kremlin spokesperson Peskov describing it as a matter of grave concern. Do you think these missiles, in a literal sense of this word, change the balance on the battlefield to such a degree that Russia might be compelled to reconsider its current position, which presently described by many as being incredibly hawkish?
Well, the Kremlin expresses grave concern every single instance that the West, particularly the United States, increases the quality of the weapon systems that are being sent to Ukraine themselves against the Russian invasion. Expressed grave concern when the United States provided HIMARS, that advanced guided rocket system to Ukraine. The Kremlin expressed concern when they provided X-teams alongside with NATO allies to Ukraine to shoot down Russian missiles and Russian planes. Previously unthinkable. The Kremlin expressed grave concern when M1A1 Abrams tanks, American main battle tanks, were provided to Ukraine for the first time in a very long time. Reduced tanks on the ground, on a ground war on the European, and a number of other significant American weapon systems that the Kremlin had said would have crossed a red line. But when a red line is crossed, over and over and over again, it really significantly dilutes the Kremlin's threat to retaliate. So we've seen this type of response every time the United States has significantly enhanced weapon systems, particularly the long-range weapon systems that they provided Ukraine with NATO allies that led death of tens of over 1,000 Russian soldiers. So it does not seem that Washington is too overly concerned by Russian threats if President Trump does decide to send those Tomahawk long-range cruise missiles to Ukraine, the type of missiles that we can expect Vladimir Zelenskyy to ask President. So it is not completely off the table, and it doesn't seem that Washington is too by any Russian strategic response, given that the Russian military is entirely deployed inside Ukraine.
Yeah, Ube, as I'm being informed, as I see, I'm sure you as well, President Donald Trump there, and President Volodymyr Zelenskyy is arriving at the entrance of the White House, and yes, that moment has arrived, and Zelenskyy is there. Well, currently we're receiving the live feed from the White House. That we see the two leaders, and soon, of course, there will be bilateral meeting between them, and the 15-minute section of that will be open to public. So, well, if to be absolutely honest, on the basis of what we have just seen, it looks like although it's very difficult to say anything about the chemistry between these two leaders, but what we observed in late February wasn't positive. It was an outright calamity. Second one was much better, constructive. Regarding this one, of course, we are yet to issue our verdict. Zelenskyy arrived. He is here, and soon, of course, we will be able to gain access to that live feed, which will be related to the 15-minute public portion of Zelenskyy-Trump meeting. In the meantime, John, I would like to bring you in. During our conversations over the past few months, you have consistently drawn very clear line, I remember, between ceasefire and peace negotiations a few months ago. But that distinction is no longer there. Right? Even that distinction also existed in relation to Gaza peace plan, and the 20-point Trump plan entails both ceasefire elements and also long-term peace plans. So before we get access to that feed, I want to put to you this question. Are we now approaching the possibility of an Ukraine peace plan, which will entail both ceasefire and also peace element? And my specific question is that if we have such a plan, what kind of language might be there applied to the territories currently occupied by Russia?
Well, President Trump continues to separate ceasefire and peace treaty, peace plan, whether it's Israel, Gaza, or Russia, Ukraine, because he knows that in both of these instances, both conflicts, the outcomes are fragile and the outcomes can change day to day. So in his mind, he still looks at, as we've heard him talk about Gaza and Israel, he views that as peace. He has brought peace to the Middle East. I think most observers would say there is not peace in the Middle East, and there's certainly not peace in Gaza, not peace in Israel, not peace between Israel and Gaza. There are ongoing issues that are going to take a long time to resolve. With Ukraine and Russia, even though President Putin or President Trump initially said, I want to do a ceasefire. He meets in Alaska. He comes out of Alaska with, okay, we're going to bypass the ceasefire, go right to the peace treaty. But we're sort of circling back again because it is going to be a step-by-step process. I'm sorry.
Thank you, John. Thank you very much indeed for your analysis. We'll get back to that point, the distinction between ceasefire and peace. As I understand, we'll be joining live feed from the Oval Office very, very soon indeed, and bearing witness to that public portion of the meeting, which has started already, as I'm given to understand. In the meantime, John, about distinction between ceasefire and peace, naturally, and you earlier talked about Gaza. It's a delicate question whether we have peace in the Middle East or not. Now, technically, of course, that fundamental legally binding peace arrangement, of course, may not be there. But many people, describe what Donald Trump achieved on the 13th of October as something absolutely monumental. And you earlier, I think, Ube mentioned about the pressure he so judiciously and deliberately exerted on the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, which is probably responsive only to US pressure. I remember his reaction to the statements coming from Paris, from London. They were one of disdain, one of some acrimony, but there was never a sense that those decisions will have a bearing upon what Israel thinks the right course of action should be. Ube, just one question to you. We are, of course, reacting to what is happening there, and once we have the live feed, we will be joining it. But in the meantime, specifically, I would like to ask you about what is the key deliverable of this meeting? Just one tangible thing, if it emerges as a result of the meeting, that would be good enough to be going on with.
Yeah, President Trump put significant amount of public pressure on Hamas and privately a lot of pressure on Bibi Netanyahu, that it was the Arab Gulf states and other Muslim countries like Turkey, Qatar, Indonesia that went to Hamas and told them, take this deal. It's not a perfect deal. This is your last chance. President Trump is serious. He will just allow the Israelis to do whatever they want to do if you don't take this deal. So this is the type of pressure that Vladimir Zelenskyy has been called for the US, which is by far the largest military in the NATO military alliance and by far the biggest contributor of weapons to Ukraine, that Zelenskyy wants that type of pressure being put on Vladimir Putin. President Trump, it's all about the oil. Russia's economy is entirely oil-based. You take out the customer base for Russian oil exports, you destroy the economy, you destroy the Russian war machine. But President Trump has time and time again said that it is Western Europe that is purchasing Russian oil, that is through third parties, a lot of it going through Greece. And so why should America continue to fight against Russia when European countries themselves are fewer? So that has been the position of the Trump administration. And we've seen, of course, President just very recently yet additional pressure on India, on the government of Narendra Modi, India being a big purchaser of oil on the international market as well. In terms of what's a major deliverable, I don't think you can expect President Trump to go to the podium and say, yes, I'm going to give Ukraine tomahawk. Trump likes to be sometimes have little strategic ambiguity, but the fact that intelligence leaks to the American media indicate that behind closed doors, the United States has increased its intelligence and targeting support to Ukraine that has enhanced Ukraine's lethality in targeting Russian oil infrastructure. I think it was significant here, and it goes to shine. It seems the Trump administration has increased their support to Ukraine. A big reason for that is because European countries, NATO member states, have now agreed to purchase American weapons for them to Ukraine. So, and that has really been an ban for President Trump, saying that he's not going to give these weapons for free, something that he's criticized his predecessor Joe Biden on a number of times.
Thank you, B. John, just let's talk about the potential role opening for Turkey. Earlier, a few days ago, President Donald Trump praised the president of Turkey, saying that he's a tough man, he likes him, he's a friend of Erdogan. And also there was a talk about Turkey acting as a mediator between Russia and Ukraine. We found ourselves in a very kind of delicate, intricate situation. President Donald Trump talks to Zelenskyy separately and talks to Putin and wants to bring them together, apparently. There's also needs for some kind of regional heavyweight in the shape of Turkey to be more proactively involved. There is a question of them meeting in Hungary in 2 weeks' time. What is the place of Turkey in this whole story?
President Erdogan, he's a G20 country, a $1+ trillion economy. He's got a lot of weight. He's got a lot of weight to throw around. But what Turkey doesn't have is money. So it's not, Qatar-like or UAE-like or Saudi Arabia-like, where in Turkey's case, big economy, they make things, they project their companies globally, but he doesn't have a lot of money to throw around to basically buy influence. And so President Trump looks at him and says, okay, President Erdogan is a tough guy. That's what he says. And people call him to influence President Erdogan. President Erdogan, Turkey has commercial, economic, financial, political relations with Ukraine. Turkey companies are the largest foreign investor in Ukraine and has substantial dealings in the Russian Federation. But he is a member of NATO. And Turkey has taken decisions, including shooting down Russian jets in Syria, has taken positions in terms of implementing some of the sanctions that President Putin doesn't really like. And at the same time, Turkey has allowed flights, tourists from Russia to go into go into Turkey, the nuclear power plant being built. And so that's a problem for President Zelenskyy.
John, I'm terribly sorry for interrupting you. How serious was President Donald Trump a few weeks ago when he met President Erdogan in the Oval Office, when he said that we would expect Turkey also to stop buying oil or gas resources from Russia? Was that something seriously said, or was it part of the general rhetoric? Because as I understand, there is a degree of criticism regarding European Union, whose economic relations with Russia is still there and still benefits Russia's war machine. But Turkey has been very careful using both LNG and also Russian natural gas resources, with this reality being acknowledged and tolerated by the United States. How serious was Trump when he said that we would like Turkey to stop buying oil, gas from Russia?
I think it was serious in terms of his intent, but also acknowledging the reality on the ground, as the Trump administration liked to say during its first term and into the second term. And that is, there are certain commercial, economic, financial, and political boundaries that President Erdogan cannot cross for his government to survive, whether he's seeking re-election or not. And so, President Trump is serious about it, but he also knows it's a soundbite. And he's just sort of waving the carrots out there to let President Erdogan know, we know this is happening, so we can use your help. same statements he's made to China, to
Okay,
India.
I'm sorry, John. I'm terribly sorry for interrupting again. I'm terribly sorry. This is a reality of our current situation. We just received information from my colleague.
So
We are
involved
currently joining the live feed in the White House, and we are listening to what President Donald Trump is saying.
President Trump.
Was he what? Where are you from?
From Ukraine. He actually had
Okay, good.
with me.
Good, yeah.
What if Mr. President Putin doesn't agree to peace in Hungary? What do you do then? Do you have?
Well, let's see what happens. I mean, what if? I think he will. I think that President Putin wants to end the war, or I wouldn't be talking this way. I think he wants to end the war. I spoke to him yesterday for 2.5 hours. We went through a lot of details. He wants to get it ended. I think that President Zelenskyy wants to get it ended. Now we have to get it done.
President Trump, Kara Castronova from Lindell TV. And although I love asking you questions, today my question is for President Zelenskyy
Sure.
of Ukraine.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Our President Zelenskyy, President Trump, just brokered a peace deal in the Middle East that all Americans, both sides of the aisle, are very proud of. But to meet that deal, both sides had to make concessions. Our president has stuck out his neck in many ways to make a peace deal for your war as well. What specific concessions are you willing to make to end this war with Russia? Will you give up joining NATO? Americans have foreign war fatigue, and our president, as he said, we need our tomahawks too.
To me.
Yes, you, President
Okay.
Zelenskyy.
Thank you
What
very much.
concessions will you
That's some question, right?
So many
Thank
questions
you.
in one. Thank you very much for your question. First of all, I think we need to sit and speak. The second point, we need ceasefire. Even now, you see in the Middle East, it's very difficult to hold ceasefire. Everywhere, in every war, it's very difficult. We want peace. Putin doesn't want. That's why we need pressure on him. We will speak with President today what we need. We understand what we need to push Putin to negotiation table. And as I said previously, so we are ready to speak in any kind of format, bilateral, trilateral, doesn't matter, just peace. This is important. And we don't speak about NATO or NATO. For Ukrainians, it's very important. Of course, it's our decisions of allies to decide where we are.
But are you willing to give
Yes,
up
but
joining
the
NATO?
most important thing for people in Ukraine which are under each day's attacks, to have really strong security guarantees. NATO is the best, but weapon is very important. Allies on our side is very important. And between us, for us, bilateral security guarantees between me and President Trump is very important. I don't know, we didn't speak with details about it, but this is the most important document because the United States is very strong.
Sir, President Trump,
Peter?
President Trump, the middleman right now, hoping to end this conflict. Who is doing a better job negotiating, President Zelenskyy or President Putin?
I think they're both doing a great job in that sense. We have to get it done. We've got to take some of the hatred of each other. They don't like each other. I say that in front of President Zelenskyy, but I say it in front of President Putin too. They have tremendous bad blood. It really is what is holding up, I think, a settlement. I think we're going to get it done, and we have to make it long-lasting. As I said in the Middle East, everlasting, right? Everlasting. And the Middle East is a much more complicated situation. We had 59 countries involved, and every one of them agreed. And it's sort of amazing. Most people didn't think that was doable. This is going to be something I really believe that's going to get done. I had a very good talk yesterday with President Putin. I think he wants to get it done.
And President
Peter?
Zelenskyy, right behind you. When we were in Israel with President Trump earlier in the week, we heard a lot about the difference in diplomacy between President Trump and President Joe Biden before him. What do you see as the biggest difference in diplomacy between President Trump and President Biden?
President Trump has a big chance now to finish this war. President Biden now is not the president, so he doesn't have a chance to finish this war. And President Trump is really showed for the world that he can manage ceasefire in Middle East, and that's why I hope that he will do this, and we will also have such big success. For Ukraine, it's a big chance, and I hope that President Trump can manage it.
I would say the biggest difference is one is extremely competent and the other one is grossly incompetent.
Sir, a few weeks ago in New York when you two met, you said that you think Ukraine could ultimately take back all the territory that it's lost so far. Do you still think that's the case, or do you think there'll have to be some sort of
You
swap
never
of
know.
territories?
Look, you know, war is very interesting. You never know, do you? You just never know. With war and peace, but you never know. Please.
Russia calls Tomahawk supply to Ukraine as an escalation, yet it continues using similar cruise missiles like Caliber. And
Yeah.
even
Who are you with? Who are you with? You Ukraine?
Yes.
Good.
But Russia continue even using the cruise missiles and also nuclear-capable ballistic missiles in Ukraine since 2022. So do you consider providing Ukraine with the Tomahawk or similar missiles as an opportunity to equalize the possibilities of Ukraine and Russia and push Moscow to the negotiation
Yeah.
table?
Sure. We're going to be talking about that. That's why we're here. Okay? Fair question. Exactly as he told you to say it. But we're going to be talking about it. Okay? Yeah, please.
Mr. President, message to India and Hungary, who is still refusing.
You said India and Hungary? That's an interesting.
And Hungary
India and Hungary. It's an interesting combination.
refuse to stop buying Russian oil.
Well, India is not going to be buying Russian oil anymore. And Hungary is sort of stuck because they have one pipeline that's been there for years and years and years, and they're inland. They don't have sea. They don't have sea. And I spoke with the very great leader of Hungary, and they are, you know, it's very hard for them to get oil. I understand it. Hungary's in a very interesting position because they can't have ports. You know, they're surrounded by land. So we'll see what happens there. But India will not be buying oil from Russia. And, they've already de-escalated and they've more or less stopped. They're pulling back. They bought about 38% of the oil, and they won't be doing it anymore.
Mr. President Trump has been helping you in achieving peace in Ukraine.
Who has?
First Lady Melania Trump
Yeah.
has been helping in returning abducted Ukrainian children from Russian captivity. President Zelenskyy, do you appreciate those efforts? How do you assess them? And did you ask her to step in and to help you?
No, she wanted to do it. She just felt very strongly about the children. And she's done a really good job, I think, in bringing it to the fore. You know, we have a lot of children involved. Now, it's some people say it's 20,000 and some people say it's 300. There's a big difference between that, so nobody really knows. But she felt very strongly about the children. She thinks about the children all the time.
President Trump, if you okay Tomahawks to Ukraine, what's going to happen if the United States is in a conflict and we need the Tomahawks? Do we have enough?
That's a problem. We need Tomahawks, and we need a lot of other things that we've been sending over the last 4 years to Ukraine. We've been, you know, we gave them a lot. Now we have a different situation. We send it to the European Union. They pay for it and all that, and they have plenty of money. But it's beyond the money. You know, we need Tomahawks, and we need a lot of other weapons that we're sending to Ukraine. One of the reasons we want to get this war over is exactly that. It's not easy for us to give. You're talking about massive numbers of very powerful weapons. So that's one of the things we'll be talking about. Hopefully they won't need it. Hopefully we'll be able to get the war over with without thinking about Tomahawks. I think we're fairly close to that. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I say,
yeah, please.
Just to understand. So for today, of course, we want to finish this war, but the war is another technological war. You don't use just Tomahawks. If you want to target a military goal, you need thousands of drones. It goes together with such missiles. Ukraine has such thousands of our production drones, but we don't have Tomahawks. That's why we need Tomahawks. But United States is a very strong production And the United States has Tomahawks and other missiles, very strong missiles. But they can have our thousands of drones. That's why where we can work together, where we can strengthen American production.
And so just so that I understand, so you're suggesting kind of a trade. If President Trump okays Tomahawk missiles to help you launch...
Yes, it's about
Russia,
military goals. It's only about military goals.
Right, but then you would authorize some kind of an exchange where...
Yes, of course.
The US
yes, we have proposition. Yeah, we have big proposition with our drones.
President Trump, I don't mean to be brokering an arms deal here, but is that something that you would be interested in, Ukrainian drones?
We are, yeah, we would. We have a lot of drones right now. We build our own drones, but we also buy drones from others, and they make a very good drone. I mean, drone warfare has really come to the fore over the last couple of years because of this war. I will say, there's nothing like the jets. You know, we knocked out a lot of drones in Israel. We were knocking them out for Israel, and we were doing it with extremely fast and powerful jets, following the drones and knocking the hell out of them. So, it's, you know, we know a lot about the drones, and we know a lot about the great jets, the great ones. The ones, well, and the B-52s, which were totally they were stealth. They were undetectable. So we have a lot of different weapons. And, you know, I have an obligation also, though, to make sure that we're completely stocked up as a country, because you never know what's going to happen. In war and peace, right? You never know what's going to happen. So we're going to be talking about Tomahawks, and would much rather have them not need Tomahawks. Would much rather have the war be over, to be honest, because, you know, we're in it to get the war over. We're selling a lot of different types of weapon, as you know, to the European Union. We're not in it for that. We're in it to get it over. We're losing thousands of people a week. Thousands of people, Russian, Ukrainian, mostly soldiers. I mean, mostly soldiers. But we're in it to see that end. And if we can end quickly, and I think we can. I mean, I had a very good talk yesterday. We're going to be talking about it. But I had a very productive talk yesterday with President Putin. We'll see what happens. But the war in the Middle East was far more complicated. We got that one done. And I think we have a good chance. I think President Zelenskyy wants it done, and I think President Putin wants it done. Now all they have to do is get along a little bit.
President
Can you give us an update on the trade negotiations with China, or perhaps Secretary Bessent?
Yeah, I will, and I'm going to let Scott do that. But I think we're doing very well. I think we're getting along with China. China would like to have something. As of this moment, we'll be meeting in a couple of weeks. We'll be meeting in South Korea.
You think
myself.
Will go forward?
I think so. It looks like it's going forward. I think so. They want to meet. We like to meet. I have a very good relationship with President Xi, and we're going to see what happens. But, you know, for years we were taken advantage of by China very badly. We were losing hundreds of billions of dollars a year to China. We really built their military, if you think about it. The kind of money that presidents allowed to be lost to China was just insane. And then when I came into office, as you know, I put very severe tariffs. So we took in hundreds of billions of dollars in my first term from China. Biden let that go because it was so much. He let it continue, but he gave all sorts of exceptions. And by the time you looked at it, Scott, I would say it wasn't the same thing. He would give an exception for anything. If you got up and went out to dinner, he'd give you an exception. So it wasn't the same thing. But I put on very serious tariffs. So we took in hundreds of billions of dollars. And then I left office. The election was rigged. I left office, and that was the story. Now I come back, and we are in a very strong position because of tariffs. We're in a very powerful position because of the fact that we have tariffs. If we didn't have tariffs, we would be in a very weak position. We would be in a weakened state. But with tariffs, we've made hundreds of billions of dollars, not only from China, but from others. And China wants to talk, and we like talking to China. So we have a very good relationship, and we're going to be meeting in South Korea a couple of weeks. And I just got back from a long trip. I'm going on another long trip. And Scott, do you want to say a few words on that, please?
Yes, sir. So the entire relationship stems from the great respect that the two leaders have for each other. China did a substantial, unprovoked escalation last week. We were unable to get in touch with them. Since then, it's been IMF World Bank Week. They have had working level people here who there have been meetings. The Vice Premier, who is my counterpart, and I will be speaking this evening at around 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then he and I and a delegation will meet in Malaysia probably a week from tomorrow to prepare for the two presidents to meet. So I think that things have de-escalated. We hope that China will show the respect that we have shown them. And I am confident that President Trump, because of his relationship with President Xi, will be able to get things back on a good course. Is the hope for that meeting with you and President Xi some kind of trade deal then, or
could be
more?
Look, I think we're in a very strong position. We're getting, as you know, as of November 1st, I could move it up if I wanted, a 100% tariff over and above what we get now. So that would make it about 157%. And China doesn't want that, and they want to talk, and we're talking. And I think we'll make a deal that will be good for both. I think we will do something. But you have to understand, we never got anything from China. It was a one-way street. For many years, for decades, it was a one-way street. And they became rich because of the United States. And frankly, presidents that, let's be nice, they didn't know. They just didn't know. They didn't understand what was happening to them. But I understood it. I understood it long before I ran for politics. I used to watch in amazement at how stupid our country was, how stupid they were. And we're not stupid anymore. And that includes with the European Union, that includes with Japan and South Korea. All we want to do is be treated fairly. But the fairly is hundreds of billions and even trillions of dollars coming into the United States. And it's our national security is secure because of tariffs. If we didn't have tariffs, we would have no national security. So it's very important.
Will you seek China's help in ending the war in Ukraine? Do you need them to put pressure on Russia?
I'll be discussing that, but I'd love to see it ended before that.
President
I mean, I think we have a chance of ending the war quickly if flexibility is shown on behalf. And again, we're not losing people. The United States is not. We're not losing people. We're not spending money. We're getting paid for the, ammunition and missiles and everything else that we're sending to the European Union, but to NATO. But it's very similar. If you look at the countries, I mean, it's very similar. And we just made a very fair trade deal with the European Union, and what we wanted, and we made a very good deal with NATO too. They pay for all of this. That's not what we're in this for. We're in it to save thousands of lives every week. Thousands and thousands of lives. That's why we're in it. And I think we have a very good chance of bringing this war to a conclusion.
Europe's president and your cabinet has done honestly an excellent job. I think that a lot of people could agree to that.
Thank you.
I'm speaking as someone who lost my father in a war, so I know the human cost. What would your advice be to American leaders, to world leaders, to neocons, to TV hosts who often speak about conflict in abstract or strategic terms rather than the human cost and the human terms?
Look, my only statement is we have to get together. It's a very small group of people. It's the president, and the president. Okay, 3 presidents. And I'm the mediator president. And I'm mediating not an easy situation. It should be easy, but it's a lot easier when people understand each other, when they get together, and when they like each other. We don't necessarily have that situation as far as like is concerned. Maybe it can turn around. Maybe it can. But in the meantime, we'll have them keep a little bit of distance, and we're going to see if we can get it done. This is number 9, okay? This will be number 9 for me. I've solved 8, including the Middle East. I've solved 8. This, I thought, would have been among the easiest. We solved, President Putin mentioned yesterday Armenia, all of the different wars. He said it was amazing because but the big one that he was surprised that we were able to settle was the Middle East. He thought it was incredible. He was very generous in that sense. This should be something we're able to settle, and I think we will be able to settle. Brian.
Sir, on that note, you will go down as the peacemaker, no doubt, and you will resolve this war.
Well, you know, we resolved 8 others. It's funny how people say that. If you get this one, every time I do one, they forget about that one. I solved 8 wars. Go to Rwanda and the Congo, talk about India and Pakistan, look at Thailand, look at all of the wars that we solved. And every time I solve one, they say, if you solve the next one, you're going to get the Nobel Prize. I didn't get a Nobel Prize. Somebody got it who's a very nice woman, very nice. I don't know who she is, but she was very generous. So I don't care about all that stuff. I just care about saving lives. But this will be number 9. But every time I solve one, they said, sir, if you solve one more, you're going to be known as a peacekeeper. So to the best of my knowledge, we've never had a president that solved one war. Not one war. Bush started a war. A lot of them start wars, but they don't solve the wars. They don't settle them. And especially when they have nothing to do with us. I saw almost, I guess, just about all of these wars had nothing to do with us. But I saved tens of millions of lives. The Prime Minister of Pakistan said, I saved millions of lives in interceding on Pakistan, and you look at Pakistan and India as an example. That would have been a bad one, 2 nuclear nations, right? So I say this, this is pretty much the last one, although I do understand that Pakistan attacked, or there is an attack going on with Afghanistan. That's an easy one for me to solve if I have to solve it. In the meantime, I have to run the USA, but I love solving wars. You know why? I like stopping people from being killed, and I've saved millions and millions of lives, and I think we're going to have success with this war. Wait, please.
This, President Zelenskyy, this is your 3rd time over here.
Oh.
And by the way, you look excellent.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
For you, by the way. This is your 3rd time here. How different sitting across from the president is this time versus the 2 previous times here at the White House, and how confident are you hearing the success rate of solving these prior wars that he can get this war solved?
First of all, about feud. The same feud because the same president. It's very simple. The next president will have another feud. Yes. About our relations with President Trump, I think we have important dialogues, and I think we begin to understand each other. Yes, and I know that President is briefed very well about situation in the battlefield, and he knows a lot what's going on the battlefield in Ukraine, and I think it really helps when you know a lot of things, a lot of details about one or another war. It helps a lot, but we are still in war, and I hope we can manage it. I think it's
that there are some
important.
countries that are not meeting their commitment. You pointed out Spain. They said that it's impossible.
No, Spain has not come through. No, Spain has not been loyal to NATO. Spain has been, they're the only one. Everyone went up to, as you know, I mean, you were at 2% and they all went up to 5%, but Spain disagreed with that. I think Spain should be reprimanded for that. I think it's very bad that they did that, but that's up to them. That's up to NATO and Spain.
They cannot be expelled from NATO.
Can they or not?
They cannot, according to the treaty, but they also claim that they are protected by the European Union umbrella for trade.
Well, the other people, many of the other countries are in the European Union too. They're not complaining, right?
President, tell you that Putin is serious.
That's of interest.
Mr.
They're
President.
protected. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. President. Do you think you can carry the momentum from the Middle East deal over to this deal? And if
I do.
So, how does that move the needle?
Yeah, I do. I think we carry a lot of momentum, a lot of credibility. Getting Middle East done was very important. Nobody thought it could be done. That was one nobody thought could be done, and we got it done. And a lot of that was the big hit that we put on Iran with respect to the nuclear. They took that was an unbelievable military maneuver, the B-2s, and many other planes involved, by the way, but the B-2s. Yeah, I think nobody expected that to happen. And, you know, we had 59 countries involved, and these were countries very diverse. You had Arab, Muslim, Jewish, you had every country, Christian, you had every country, and many countries involved, and we got that done. And we got it done pretty swiftly after we set the table properly. We had to set the table properly. This should be one that we get done. And I think the table is set properly here now, too. And it'll be a great honor. It'll be a great honor to get it done. And the Ukrainian people are great, and the Russian people are great. And obviously they have much in common, as we understand. They have a lot in common. So it'll be a great honor to get it done.
On Venezuela, there are survivors from your latest boat strike. What happens to those survivors?
Well, I'll ask Marco to discuss that possibly.
Yeah, it's well known there's an ongoing narco-terrorist operation the United States has been conducting. As far as details of any recent strikes, we're not prepared here to announce all those details, but you'll get that information here very shortly.
And how are there survivors when these are meant to be lethal attacks?
Yeah, again, I mean, we're undertaking these operations against narco-terrorists. That's what these are. These are terrorists. Let's be clear. And but as far as the details of any recent operations, when we are prepared to announce those, we will, as the president has consistently done. So you may get something on that later today.
Let me ask you, that was in a submarine, right? We attacked a submarine, and that was a drug-carrying submarine built specifically for the transportation of massive amounts of drugs, just so you understand. This was not an innocent group of people. I don't know too many people that have submarines. And that was an attack on a drug-carrying, loaded-up submarine. Yeah.
On Putin, is it your belief, as Mr. Zelenskyy said yesterday, that the threat of tomahawks and costs, as Secretary Hicks put it, is that bringing him to the table, the fact that it's kind of a carrot and stick?
I don't know what's bringing him to I think he wants to make a deal, that's all. I can't tell you what's bringing him. Sure, that's the threat of that is good, but the threat of that is always there. Tomahawks are very dangerous weapons. They're incredible weapons. If you like warfare, it's one of the most accurate. You know, we hit 30 Tomahawks in Iran after the B-2s did their damage. We sort of gave it a little capper with 30 Tomahawks from a submarine, quite far away actually, but they're an amazing weapon. They're a very powerful weapon, but they're a very dangerous weapon, and it could mean big, escalation. It could mean a lot of bad things can happen. Tomahawks are a big deal. But one thing I have to say, we want Tomahawks also. We don't want to be giving away things that we need to protect our country. We have a very strong country right now. We have a strong military. We have the greatest military in the world. We have the greatest weapons in the world. I want to get this war over. Okay?
Putin-Trump tunnel to connect Russia and Alaska. Are you interested?
I just heard about it. A tunnel from Russia to Alaska. I just heard about that one. That's an interesting one. We'll have to think about that. I hadn't heard that. We just did a nice road in Alaska that's going to get us to a lot of minerals, and we have a piece of it, a good piece of the ownership because of the fact we made it possible. But this came up yesterday, a tunnel from Russia to Alaska. That's an interesting. What do you think of that, Mr. President? Do you have any ideas? How do you like that idea?
I'm not happy with this.
I don't think you're going to like it. I don't think he liked it. I don't think he liked it.
President Trump, do you think that Vladimir Putin, do you think that Putin is your gut instinct?
Well, we had a senator that wanted, remember, from Hawaii, she wanted a tunnel from the mainland to Hawaii, and she said, well, we can't do that, so we're going to build a railroad to Hawaii. Do you remember? She's a current sitting senator, a Democrat. She wants a railroad to go to Hawaii, right? You know who that is, right? She's another beauty.
President Trump, your gut instinct.
Yeah, please.
On your meeting with Putin, aren't you concerned that maybe the Russian president is trying to buy himself more time?
Yeah, I am, but, you know, I've been played all my life by the best of them, and I came out really well. So it's possible, yeah, a little time.
Is your gut instinct
it's all right. But I think that I'm pretty good at this stuff. I think that he wants to make a deal. I made 8 of them. I'm going to make a 9th. I think he wants to make a deal.
Do you still consider Russia to be a paper tiger? Do you think, judging by the state of its economy,
Well, I think that he should have won the war in a week. Yeah, I do think. And if we didn't give the anti-tank missiles, as you know, the javelins they call them, they got stuck in the mud. They would have been in Kiev very quickly. They were heading to Kiev. So, in war you have a lot of luck too. Weather has won war, and the cold and the heat and all things take place in war. But that was a very interesting moment when the tanks started rolling and some brilliant general said, let's go through the mud instead of going down the highway, right? So they got a little bit lucky. But you know where they really got lucky? I gave javelins. That wasn't given by Barack Hussein Obama. He gave them sheets. There's a statement. Obama gave them sheets and I gave them the javelins. And the javelins are a devastating weapon. And that wasn't given by Obama. That was given by, because at the time it was Obama. That was given by me. So it was like one of those things. And you had hundreds of them. They're a devastating weapon. We have a lot of devastating weapons. I'd rather not use them. But that was a big moment. When the tanks got stuck, they got stuck. And call it luck or call it talent. I'm not sure what you'd call it, but it was a big moment in time.
Do you think Democrats will give you credit? Do you think Democrats will give you credit when you finally end this war, like they did with the war in the Middle East? And
I think right now the Democrats are really damaged, mentally damaged. They want to take 1.5 trillion with a T, $1 trillion, and give it to people that invaded our country. They came into our country illegally, from prisons, from mental institutions, gang members. They want to give them health care and take it away from our citizens. We're not going to do that. $1.5 trillion. They want to destroy. They want to destroy our health care system. We're not going to let that happen.
Have you authorized CIA operations in Venezuela as part of?
Well, I wouldn't say that, but some interesting things are happening around the world. I'll say that.
It's been reported, Mr. President, it has been reported that Maduro offered everything in his country, all the natural resources. He even recorded a message to you in English recently, offering mediation. What should we do in order to stop that?
He has offered everything. He's offered everything. You're right. You know why? Because he doesn't want to fuck around with the United States. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Press.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys. Let's go. Start moving. Thank you, guys. Let's go. Thank you, guys. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Press. Thank you, Press.
Thanks, President Trump.
Press, keep going.
Good job.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome back. We just finalized watching the live feed coming from, not from the Oval Office, not from that peculiarly shaped cockpit of American power projection, but from the White House still, from that self-same building. Fascinating discussion. I'm not entirely sure, but I think that we heard F-word as well there. And we also, very interestingly enough, the conversation there was absolutely wide-ranging, not necessarily all connected with Ukraine, but with a number of issues related to American foreign policy agenda. China was clearly mentioned there. John and Ube, I'm sure you're still there. Thank you very much for faithfully waiting all along throughout this live feed. John, my question to you. We realize what's happening. With President Donald Trump, there is an appreciation for the factor of power and factor of pressure. And when he was describing the way he believes China should be managed, he talked about tariffs as a leverage. So, if Russia behaves as a rational actor, what kind of pressure could induce it to accept a plan that may not be Ukrainian victory, but still good enough to be going on with? What have you understood from this bilateral lunch and in the context of the discussion surrounding Tomahawk and many other related matters?
It's always amazing to to watch President Trump. You're simultaneously you're appalled, you're disgusted, and you're mesmerized, because this is a live feed from in his brain, and he's all over the place. There are truths, there are falsehoods, but it does come around to, you get an idea whether it's Ukraine related or not. It's how he looks at things, and how he looks at China, how he looks at India, how he looks at Turkey. And then in terms of Russia, if you grab the totality of what he said, it would be President Putin will respond to economic coercion. And so the question will be, is President Trump prepared to unilaterally use all the tools, meaning sanctions, tariffs, etc., in the U.S. commercial, economic, political, financial arsenal to coerce President Putin? And I would say that that's unlikely, because, as we talked about before, President Trump looks at Russia-Ukraine war as not the U.S.'s problem to solve. It is Europe's problem to solve. And I think, for me, most important word that President Trump used in his remarks was the word, he sees himself as a mediator. President Zelenskyy, from the day the war began, February 24, 2022, had always said he doesn't want the U.S., NATO countries, EU countries to be mediators. He wants them on the side of Ukraine. And President Trump's second term, that's the same message he's been continually saying. I don't want President Trump as a mediator. I want him on our side against the aggressor. We're the victim. And the fact that President Trump sees himself as a mediator, like Gaza, Israel, that this isn't our thing, but I'll be involved to try to solve it, whether it's temporarily or permanently.
He wasn't a mediator in relation to the conflict in Gaza. He was more on the side of Israel, which was very clear. And you can tell it from the language he employs. He still says that if Hamas does not react, we will get it done by other means. So he uses the word we, as if Israel and US is one force. Thank you, John. Ube, I would like to come to you. Fascinating bilateral lunch, absolutely fascinating. Donald Trump never ceases to actually surprise and mesmerize, as John said. Incredibly consequential figure, and seems to be absolutely convinced of his centrality. If I can't sort it out, nobody else. And he now, it says that he sorted out 8 conflicts, and the Ukraine one should be number 9. I want to hear your major really reflection on what we have seen. Do you think we are getting there? And what is Trumpian sort of sensibility now?
Well, to paraphrase our president, don't F with the United States. It's actually very note that he ended the press conference on that note. That was a question regarding Venezuela. He was asked, why does President Maduro, as well as willing to, and Trump said that's because he learned not to F, paraphrasing, using the full word, with the United States. That is part of the art of the deal. You have to have military power, military leverage, the ability to inflict pain on an adversary or on a potential adversary to bring the negotiating table. And we heard from Vladimir Zelenskyy is that he believes that only through military pressure and changing the balance of the battlefield will force Vladimir to the negotiating table. The problem is that Vladimir Putin is being told by his military advisors that he's winning the war and that his forces will eventually win the war. And so what the Kremlin is asking is for major concessions from Ukraine to include territory, the Donbass region in Ukraine that is still held by Ukrainian, and that has been a non-starter for Kyiv and for Vladimir Zelenskyy. So until that calculus shifts, until Vladimir Putin, if he can ever be convinced, believes that his forces have no chance winning the war and making a major breakthrough, there is not sufficient incentive for Putin to agree to President Trump's plan. Now, President Trump does, according to what we just heard, does believe that his recent phone call that was just about 24 hours ago with President Putin, which lasted 2 hours, went well, according to President Trump. The question is, will Moscow agree to they are the invading Vladimir Zelensky? He is also willing to make trade, a military trade with the United States to offer proven Ukrainian drones, including kamikaze drones, to the United States. President Trump loves those sort of deals as part of the art of the deal, with the U.S. providing advanced weapon systems and Ukraine providing some weapon systems that America, that speaks way of doing business.
Thank you, Bay. John, I would like to pose to you my last question. I think, if I'm not mistaken, during that bilateral lunch, President Donald Trump also said that he discussed Azerbaijan, Armenia with President Putin the day before. He said that we discussed Armenia. It would be very interesting, particularly as far as I'm concerned, people in this country concerned, to understand what was the nature of the discussion there about Azerbaijan, Armenia. But of course, we don't know. We know very little, and I'm not going to dwell upon that. But my last question about President Donald Trump's personality and what he reasonably expects from President Zelensky. There was one question about Biden-Trump comparison. Zelensky was very diplomatic. He said that Biden is not president, Donald Trump is president. And we know that American analysts and statesmen were always talking about the necessity of showing a bit of gratitude towards the United States. Do you think President Donald Trump has been satisfied with that answer that he heard from Zelensky when Zelensky was asked about comparison between Biden and Trump?
Probably not in totality, because President Trump is always looking to the next statement that will hopefully be more reinforcement for what was previously said. So if you say he's good, he's waiting for someone to say he's great. And if someone says he's great, he's waiting for someone to say that he's near Christ-like in his abilities. So I think he's not going to be unhappy, but he isn't going to be, fulfilled.
And not being unhappy is not exactly being happy, I suppose, in this particular case.
Yeah. And I think that, if I may, President Trump is supposed to be leaving at 3:00 for Mar-a-Lago, his resort in Florida. We were running an hour behind in terms of the luncheon beginning. So it's going to be interesting to see, does he leave on time, which means another 40, 45 minutes for the luncheon and for any kind of discussion